What's going on here, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are going to do Spider-Man the Other. And the reason why, because a while back, somebody had actually asked me to do this storyline. And for some strange reason, I read the book entirely and just never covered it. And so I told myself, we are going to cover it now. We are going to cover Spider-Man the Other. And actually, this works out because we just covered JMS Spider-Man Volume 1. And that storyline over there, that was the first appearance of Morlun. And so when it comes to Spider-Man the Other, this is actually his second appearance ever in Marvel Comics. And so it does work out for us to cover this storyline and to also continue our coverage over the history of Morlun. And so with that being said, here we go, Spider-Man the Other. Now, I do want to tell you guys one last thing before we dive into this book. Because how long this crossover was, I am going to break up this storyline to only 2 videos, a part 1 and a part 2. That is it. And after that, we are done with Spider-Man the Other. But I do hope you enjoy this very interesting storyline that Marvel gave us in the early 2000s. Now, the first chapter of this storyline actually takes place in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 1. But with that being said, we actually pick up with Peter Parker right now telling us about a nightmare that he has been having over and over again. And with this nightmare, he tells us that in his nightmare, he is dead. He's just a dead person. And right now he's in a body bag, but he's being rolled into some kind of morgue. But the person who is actually rolling him into the morgue is actually Morlun. Now this is huge because the last time Peter Parker had actually saw Morlun, Morlun was killed. Morlun died. And so with Peter Parker having this nightmare of him being dead in a body bag, being rolled into a morgue by Morlun, it does freak out Peter Parker. On top of that, when the body bag gets opened up, that is the moment he sees Kraven. And then he sees Uncle Ben holding onto some snake guys, and that is when he wakes up from the dream. And of course, he's telling this dream to Mary Jane because we have to remember at this point in Marvel Comics, they are married. And on top of that, by this point in JMS run, Peter Parker and Mary Jane actually got back together and they're actually living in Avengers Tower, the home of the Avengers, because by this point, Spider-Man was actually part of the new Avengers. But either way though, he is actually telling Mary Jane about his nightmare. Here comes the big problem though. He is telling her this nightmare while she is trying to have some fun time with him. Which of course means like, Peter Parker, this is the worst timing you can have to tell a girl about a nightmare you have when she's trying to have some fun with you. Like, dude, are you serious? Now that is the moment we do get introduced to a new Spider-Man villain known as Tracer. Now Tracer is going to be very important in the early chapters of Spider-Man the Other. And matter of fact, I want to say this was his first appearance ever in Marvel Comics. I could be wrong, but when it comes to Tracer, Tracer is a guy who used a bunch of different tech as a way to rob different banks across the city. And so with that being said right now, he is trying to rob a bank. But that is the moment he is actually confronted by Spider-Man, who is here, of course, to basically stop Tracer from getting away with all the money from the bank. Now this is the moment you actually have Marvel show us how good Tracer is when it comes to him using different kinds of techs when he is trying to accomplish his goals. And the reason why I say that because you do have Spider-Man actually try to capture Tracer, but he fails. And you do have Tracer actually shoot at Spider-Man, but he also fails. Now the reason why Tracer fails is because when it comes to bullets, Spider-Man has been able to dodge bullets very easily throughout his time in Marvel Comics. But these bullets are very special because Tracer made these bullets, and these bullets have the ability to continue to follow their target until they actually hit their target. And so no matter where their target goes, they are going to continue to follow their target. And so of course Spider-Man has to go away for now to kind of take the bullet somewhere else so that no innocent person could possibly get hurt. And of course that means that Tracer can now continue to rob the bank and hopefully get away with all the money he is trying to take with him. Now that is the moment we actually get this random flashback where of course we do get reminded that Peter Parker and Mary Jane, they do live in Avengers Tower. So does Aunt May, because Spider-Man is part of the Avengers at this point in Marvel Comics. Now of course you do have other Avengers members also living in Avengers Tower, like Captain America. Now this is the moment we come to find out that Mary Jane had apparently told Steve Rogers about the nightmare that Peter Parker has been having. And honestly, this flashback is really more of just Steve Rogers telling Peter Parker, hey man, listen, your wife came to me because she's very concerned about you because you keep having the same nightmare over and over again, and you're afraid that you could possibly die very soon. Well, listen, I want to tell you one thing. You cannot rely on your instinct. And that right there is literally the only purpose of the flashback that was given in this book. But getting back over to Spider-Man, we actually do see him right now still trying to get away from the bullets that Tracer has shot at him, because those bullets will not stop until they actually hit their target. But then you have Spider-Man realize he's having enough of running away from those bullets. And so that is the moment he decides he is going to turn around and actually try to grab the bullets, to stop the bullets with his bare hands. Now, one bullet he's able to stop, but the other one he was unable to stop, and it does go through his hand into his shoulder, which of course does make him pass out because of course he is now bleeding out. And so that is when we actually do see Spider-Man right now being patched up by Dr. Castillo. Now, at first, I actually thought that this was the night nurse, because remember, in Marvel Comics, you do have a nurse out there who will patch up heroes in secret. The heroes who are afraid to go to a hospital because they're afraid that their secret identity could get out to the world. And so I thought this was the night nurse because she is patching up Spider-Man in her office somewhere off site from the hospital. But of course, this is not the night nurse at all. It's another character that is very similar to the night nurse. But of course, she does patch up Spider-Man, but she does take a blood sample just to make sure that everything is okay with him. And that blood sample is going to be very important actually down the road in this storyline. But then we do pick up with Peter Parker right now back at Avengers Tower, and you have Mary Jane upset with Peter Parker because she wants Peter to rest because he was shot. He needs to lay down. But of course, it's Peter Parker. He's Spider-Man. He does not want to lay down until he's able to actually capture the bad guy that he was trying to capture earlier, which again is Tracer, because Tracer did get away because Spider-Man got shot. And so this section right here is really more of Mary Jane begging Peter Parker to stay here and get some rest. But of course, you do have Peter Parker leave, and he does tell Mary Jane it should not take that long because apparently Peter Parker had put a spider tracer on Tracer to hopefully locate Tracer and to finally bring him in. But here comes the big problem though, because you do have Spider-Man actually follow the location of the spider tracer, and that is the moment it actually leads him to a random limo in the middle of New York. And of course, he believes that Tracer is inside that limo. And so you do have Spider-Man drop down to the limo and actually open up the roof of the limo to look inside to hopefully find Tracer. But the person he finds in there is actually J. Jonah Jameson. And that is the moment you have Spider-Man realize that his spider tracer was put inside the limo because Tracer knew about the spider tracer and basically put it inside the limo of JJ as a way to throw Spider-Man off. And so to close on the first chapter that we're going to cover in this video right here, you do have Spider-Man right now at home laying in bed, feeling bad for what he did to the limo that belongs to JJ. But that is the moment he does get a phone call. And of course, that phone call comes from Dr. Castillo, and it's her telling Peter Parker that they need to talk because apparently she did run his blood and something is wrong with his blood sample. And of course, while he is freaking out, outside his window, you have somebody watching him. And that person that is watching him is no other than Morlun, because he is alive again and he is plotting to come back and actually hunt down Spider-Man once again. Now, the second chapter of this storyline is all about Mary Jane and how she feels about the idea that she could possibly lose her husband, because if that nightmare comes true, then Peter Parker is dead. Now, with that being said, though, right now we do see her getting ready in the dressing room for the next play that she is about to perform. But while she's reading the newspaper about her husband, we come to find out that Morlun is watching her and she has no idea that she is being watched. And matter of fact, no one else in the dressing room realized that there is this tall man behind Mary Jane watching her, because Morlun knows that this is Peter Parker's wife. This is Spider-Man's wife. And so, of course, now he's watching the loved ones of Peter Parker. But that is the moment you do have someone call Mary Jane and tell her it's time for the show. And that is the moment we actually get another flashback. Now, this flashback is really more of Mary Jane talking to Steve Rogers once again about Peter Parker, but to hopefully understand what's going on in the mind of Peter Parker by going to another superhero. And what I mean is that when it comes to Mary Jane, she is trying to figure out, why does Peter Parker feel like he must always go out there and be the hero? Why can he never just stay home for one day? Why can't he just stay home and protect himself if he's having a nightmare where there is a possibility that he could die? And of course, you have Steve Rogers tell Mary Jane, it's a pride thing. It's the pride we have because we feel like that we must go out there to protect the innocent people, no matter what is going on in our lives. It's our pride. It's our motivation to protect the ones out there who cannot protect themselves. And of course, it's a way for Mary Jane to kind of understand what is going on in the mind of Peter Parker, because she feels like with him having that nightmare of him dying, he needs to stay inside. But of course, Peter Parker does not want to do that. Now, here comes the weird part, because you do have Peter Parker walk in, and the way he walks in and sees Mary Jane and Steve Rogers talking, he kind of believes that for some strange reason, the two of them are plotting against him, and he gets so upset that he actually leaves before Mary Jane is able to explain herself. Now, that is the moment we actually jump back into the present day. And the reason why, because we pick up with Mary Jane after she just finished performing her new play. Now, this is the moment you have the book tell us that she does have this one fan that is always at every single show that she's performing in. And so with that being said, that fan is very obsessed over Mary Jane. Now, with that fan right there, he is going to be important for this chapter alone. But right after she does finish her performance, you do have her go backstage where you do have a bunch of characters right now watching the news about Spider-Man. And apparently Spider-Man and Iron Man are fighting against the Tracer. And of course, she's very worried about her husband. But that is the moment they do change the channel. And of course, it does upset Mary Jane because she was watching that because she wants to make sure that nothing bad happens to her husband. And so she does does run out of the place to go to a nearby bar to hopefully find a television so that she can watch the news about her husband. Now, while she's leaving, you do have that obsessed fan kind of stop her in her track because he wants to take her out on a date because he has no idea that she's married. But of course, you have Mary Jane kind of brush him off and move on to a nearby bar to hopefully find a television to watch the news about her husband. Now, of course, you do have Morlun kind of direct that obsessed fan by telling him you need to go follow her. She went that way, so go follow her. Now, the next section is Mary Jane going over to a nearby bar and actually paying the bartender to turn the television over to the news channel so that she can watch her husband to make sure nothing bad happens to him. Now, with that being said, though, we do see right now Mary Jane is watching Spider-Man fight against Iron Man. And the reason why he's fighting against Iron Man is because with Tracer being so good with technology, Tracer was able to take over the Iron Man suit, which is very huge to do. But with that being said, though, with the Iron Man suit being taken over, that means that right now Iron Man is fighting against Spider-Man. And so Mary Jane is hoping that she can watch this end in a good way. But that is the moment you have the news channel say they can no longer follow the fight because how crazy it is getting. And so that ends the news broadcasting of that battle between Spider-Man and Iron Man. But right after that moment right there, you do have that obsessed fan appear one more time and tries to make a move on Mary Jane because this man is just madly in love with her and he feels like Mary Jane should be with him. Now, of course, you do have this man grab Mary Jane. She tries to move away from him and he's kind of like, no, you are coming with me. But that is the moment you do have other men in the bar try to stand up for Mary Jane, but of course the obsessed fan does pull out a gun. Now, this is the moment we actually do see Mary Jane being able to protect herself from this guy by using moves that she had learned as a way to protect herself. And of course, she does knock this man out. But with this man being knocked out, of course, that is the moment you have someone else in the bar tell Mary Jane the news did come back on. There was some kind of explosion and they have no idea if Iron Man or Spider-Man were involved. But either way, you do have Mary Jane rush back home to Avengers Tower hoping to find her husband. And that is the moment you do have Mary Jane being able to get back home to Avengers Tower to only find out that Peter Parker is okay. But that is the moment you do have Mary Jane tell her husband how she truly feels about him being a hero, because she's really afraid that there could be a time Peter Parker could die. And with his death, of course, it is going to affect her a lot. And so with that being said, it's just really Mary Jane telling Peter Parker about her concerns about him being a hero. But that is the moment you have Peter Parker tell Mary Jane something very important, because remember, at the end of the last chapter, Dr. Castillo did ask Peter Parker for a meeting to talk about his test that she ran on his blood sample. And of course, the results came back. And you have Peter Parker telling Mary Jane the results of his test. And of course, you don't have Peter Parker tell us, but we do see that Mary Jane is crying because she read the paper that showed the results of Peter Parker's blood test. And of course, she's crying because something bad is about to happen to Peter Parker. Now, the third chapter of the storyline is all about Aunt May, because Aunt May is very important in Spider-Man comics when it comes to the life of Peter Parker. But with that being said, though, we actually jump back in the past where we actually pick up with Aunt May and Uncle Ben right now saying goodbye to the mother of Aunt May, because right now she's on her deathbed and Aunt May has been asked to decide to pull the plug or not on her mother, where of course you do have Aunt May telling the doctor to go ahead and pull the plug on the life support to let her mother pass on, because apparently Aunt May's mother told Aunt May that she does not want to be on life support for a very long period of time. And so Aunt May told the doctor to pull the plug on the life support, and the doctor did. But that is the moment you actually have the mother of Aunt May come to life and grab her daughter by the throat and yelling at Aunt May and saying, "We do not just give up so easily. We actually fight against death. We welcome death." And that is the moment we come to find out that this whole section right here was actually just a nightmare that Aunt May was having. Now, you do have Aunt May begin walking around Avengers Tower because remember, she did move in alongside with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. But while she's basically walking around, she does run into Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And right now, Peter Parker is very upset with Mary Jane. And the reason why, because right now, the city is under attack by Tracer. And the Avengers are having a hard time actually stopping Tracer. And Mary Jane did not wake up Peter Parker because Mary Jane felt like Peter Parker needed some rest. But of course, Peter Parker's kind of like, I'm a hero, I'm needed. And right now, my teammates are getting their butt kicks. And so you do have Peter Parker actually yell at Mary Jane right in front of Aunt May, which of course has Aunt May wonder what in the heck is going on with her nephew and why in the world is he yelling at his wife. And that's of course where you have Mary Jane just walk away and you have Peter Parker just change into his Spider-Man outfit to go help out the rest of the Avengers. Now, while you have Aunt May actually in the kitchen making herself some kind of sandwich, that is the moment she begins the process of actually talking to Uncle Ben. Now, we all know Uncle Ben is dead, but this is her trying to talk to his spirit about the idea of her actually moving on and dating Jarvis. Yes, you heard that right, Jarvis, the butler of Iron Man. But either way, while she is trying to talk to the spirit of Uncle Ben, that is the moment you have Tracer appear in the kitchen alongside with Aunt May. And this is huge because this means that Tracer was able to break into Avengers Tower. But getting back over to Spider-Man, we actually do see Spider-Man right now getting his butt kicked. Now, we have no idea what is kicking his butt, but apparently something made Spider-Man fly across the city. And of course, when he does crash land, that is the moment he actually sees Morlun. Now, with them seeing Morlun, of course, you do have Spider-Man freak out because the last time he saw Morlun, Morlun almost killed Spider-Man. Like literally, Spider-Man was just an inch closer to death. But that was the moment you have Spider-Man realize that Morlun is actually not there. And you have Wolverine come by to check up on Spider-Man. Because remember, Wolverine at this point in Marvel Comics was also on the Avengers. But either way, this is the moment you actually have Wolverine tell us what's going on right now in the city. That right now there are a bunch of machines that Tracer has made that's attacking the city right now. And of course, it is giving the Avengers a hard time. But Wolverine came here to check up on Spider-Man because Spider-Man got knocked far out by a robot. And so Wolverine wants to remind Spider-Man that, hey man, listen, you're part of a team. We must fight together as a team if we are going to be able to actually beat Tracer and these robots. Now, that is the moment we actually do jump back over to Aunt May and Tracer, because right now you actually have Aunt May and Tracer talking to one another. Now, of course, when it comes to Tracer, Aunt May has no idea that this is the bad guy that the Avengers are trying to grab. And so with that being said at the moment, right now, to her, Tracer is just another Avenger. Matter of fact, he tells her that he is just another Avenger. But then he tells Aunt May that he is some kind of god. Now that right there is actually very important, because the reason why he's telling her that is because he wants her to believe that he is actually like Thor, a god. But on top of that, he is the god of machines. But either way though, you do have these two characters talk to one another until you have someone scream at Tracer, and we all know who that person is, of course. And we come to find out that, yes, of course, it was Peter Parker Spider-Man who yelled at Tracer. And so you do have Spider-Man actually fight against Tracer. Now, I do want to mention that this fight, it actually does last for a few good pages. But either way, I do want to mention one more thing. When it comes to Aunt May's chapter, I like her chapter way better than Mary Jane's chapter. But either way, though, while you have Spider-Man fighting against Tracer, Tracer was able to get a blood sample of Peter Parker and then run that blood sample right then and there in the middle of their battle. Now, with him being able to do that, you have Tracer realize that Spider-Man is dying. And this is huge because to Tracer, he had heard all the great stories about other villains fighting against Spider-Man in his prime. And for Tracer, he hates this right now because he wanted to fight Spider-Man in his prime. He did not want a Spider-Man who's close to death. And so, of course, it makes him very upset. But then you have Spider-Man get upset because apparently to him, he hates the idea that villains are only coming after him now to just fight him because the rumor is Spider-Man is a great fighter. And so you actually have Spider-Man cut loose. And when I mean cut loose, there is a point where you actually have Spider-Man about to kill Tracer. But that is the moment we come to find out the Tracer we see right now in the room with Spider-Man, Aunt May, and Mary Jane, that is not Tracer at all. It's actually an android. The real Tracer was never there at all. Now, of course, with Aunt May seeing Peter Parker the way he acted, you have Aunt May ask Peter Parker a question, a very important question, which is, you have to tell me something. Apparently, you're hiding something from me. So what is you're not telling me? And that's, of course, the moment you have Peter Parker tell Aunt May that he is actually dying. Now, of course, when we dive into the 4th chapter of this book, we actually do pick up with Aunt May getting very upset with Peter Parker because she knows that Peter Parker knew about this for a good period of time. And she also knows that Peter Parker was planning on not actually telling her about the idea that he could die down the road because something is wrong with his blood. And so with that, she's kind of like, no. You are going to ask for help. This whole pride thing, not asking for help, it is going to stop now and you are going to ask for help. You have all these superheroes in the world and you're going to tell me none of these heroes can actually help you right now to beat this? No, I will handle it. I will go to somebody right now who can basically help you fight this to hopefully keep you alive. And we come to find out that she told Tony Stark, which makes sense because right now, Peter Parker, Aunt May, and Mary Jane, they all live in the Avengers Tower, which is owned by Tony Stark. And so, of course, you do have Luke Cage and Spider-Woman wondering what in the world is going on in the office of Tony Stark. But of course, it's just Aunt May telling Tony what is going on with Peter Parker to basically say, this man is dying. You have all these different heroes around the world. You need to begin the process of actually trying to save his life. So get to work on it right now. And the first person you actually have Peter Parker go see is Reed Richards. Now, this makes sense because when it comes to Reed Richards, he is one of the smartest people in Marvel Comics. And so if you're trying to find a cure for your disease, Reed Richards is probably your best option. Now, Reed is not alone because he also brought in Hank Pym, and they're hoping that Hank Pym and Reed could be able to actually find a cure for Spider-Man. But here comes the bad news though. Reed and Hank, they cannot help Peter Parker at all. They can't find him a cure at all. And so with that being said, you actually have Reed and Hank say, listen, you need somebody else, somebody who's great in this field of science. And because you were bitten by a radiated spider, your body's full of radiation. And there is only one character who knows that field of science very well. And that character is Bruce Banner. But of course, Bruce Banner is the Hulk. And so we have to find the Hulk to find Bruce Banner. And so, of course, the next section of the book is really more of Spider-Man, Hank Pym, Reed Richards fighting against the Hulk. Also Iron Man as well, hoping to calm the Hulk down so that the Hulk would turn back into Bruce Banner. And of course, it does last for a few pages because we need some action in this book. We can't just have an entire book just be about dialogue and that is it. We got to have some kind of action. And so we do have our heroes fighting against the Hulk, but to only stop the Hulk thanks to a high amount of gas that was made to turn Hulk back into Bruce Banner, but to also have Spider-Man kind of give some jokes over to the Hulk as a way to calm him down so that he can turn back into Bruce Banner. Because right now, Bruce could be the person to actually find a cure for Peter Parker. But with one single page, all that hope they had to hopefully find a cure for Peter Parker goes out the window, because basically you have Bruce Banner say he is unable to find a cure for Peter Parker. But that is the moment you actually have Bruce say, you know what? I do have one idea. There is one person who could possibly help you. But of course, you have to go outside the country to get that help. And of course, we should know who Bruce Banner is talking about. And that person is no other than Black Panther, T'Challa, because Wakanda is a country full of science. But T'Challa is also one of the smartest people in the world. So maybe, just maybe, T'Challa can find a way to actually help Peter Parker out. Now, when Peter Parker does arrive in Wakanda, you do have T'Challa ask Peter Parker to eat a heart-shaped herb. And the reason why, because this heart-shaped herb can kind of help T'Challa figure out what is wrong with Peter Parker. Now, usually, the heart-shaped herb is used as a way to make someone become a Black Panther. We have seen that so many times in Black Panther comics, but also the movies as well. But either way, though, he's hoping that with the heart-shaped herb, he'll be able to learn more about the body of Peter Parker and to hopefully find a cure for Peter Parker. Now, that is the moment you actually have T'Challa take Peter Parker over to a temple. Now, this temple is very important because this is the temple, and I'm going to butcher this name so badly, but the temple of Anansi. Now, Anansi is supposed to be the spider god. Now, with that being said, though, remember, in JMS Spider-Man Volume 1, he told us that when it came to Spider-Man being bit by a spider, the reason why, because Peter Parker was chosen to represent the spider totem, just like how Black Panther was chosen to represent the panther totem. And they're hoping to go inside the temple to find more clues that could possibly help them figure out what is wrong with Spider-Man. But of course, you do have Peter Parker tell T'Challa no, he does not want to go inside, and so they leave. But that is the moment you actually do have T'Challa check up on Peter Parker later on that day in the room that he has given Peter Parker to stay in. Now, this is kind of a funny moment because when T'Challa walks in, apparently the ladies of Wakanda have braided Peter Parker's hair, which to me, I kind of found a little bit funny. But either way, though, that is the moment you actually have T'Challa give Peter Parker some more bad news. Now, that is the moment we actually pick back up with Peter Parker, but back in New York. Now, this is huge because this is Peter Parker realizing that there is nothing he can do to actually survive. That with him going to every single person that he knew that is great with science, and they all told him the same thing, hey, we can't help you, because what's going on with your body is not normal and there's no way around it. It's kind of him accepting defeat, but of course he still wants to fight it. He wants to survive. And so right now he's thinking, what can he do to survive? But that is the moment he does run into Ox. Now, Ox is a very interesting character because usually he's like a D-list character who's part of a team called the Enforcers. But usually when people use Ox, they use him as a way to move the plot line forward. And once they do that, he's gone from the rest of the storyline. And Ox right now in this storyline is kind of being used the same way, as a way to move the plot line forward. And the reason why I say that, because you actually do have Spider-Man fight against Ox, because Ox was trying to take some money from an innocent person. And so you do have Spider-Man step in. But here comes the problem though. With Spider-Man stepping in and his mind right now being a dark place because he knows that sooner or later he is going to die, you once again have Spider-Man cut loose, to the point that he is badly beating down on Ox. Now, there is another reason why he's beating down badly on Ox, because while he's fighting against Ox and beating down on Ox, he begins to see Ox as Morlun. And with him seeing Morlun, you have Peter Parker freak out, because again, the last time he saw Morlun, Morlun almost killed Spider-Man. And so right now, is Spider-Man actually believing that Ox is actually Morlun, which of course means for Spider-Man, he must punch harder because he believes Ox is Morlun. But that is the moment you actually have someone stop Spider-Man. And that person is Daredevil. It is really Daredevil telling Spider-Man, listen, I have no idea what in the world is going on with you, but what I just saw right there, it tells me you're having a bad day. You need to leave. I'll handle this, but you need to leave right now. And that is the moment you have Spider-Man realize that Morlun was never there. The person he saw was Ox at first and never did change over to Morlun. And so you have Spider-Man realize that what he did is just almost killed Ox. And so of course you do have Spider-Man leave to let Daredevil handle what happened here. And that is the moment you actually have Spider-Man go over to one more person. And that last person is Doctor Strange. And this makes sense because this is Spider-Man wondering whatever is wrong with him could possibly be magic, not science. And that is the moment you actually have Strange confirm that Spider-Man is right. Whatever is wrong with Spider-Man, it's not science, it's magic. And of course, you did have Strange tell Spider-Man, listen, I know I just gave you some good news because now you know whatever is wrong with you is magic, not science. But here comes the problem though. I still can't help you. Whatever curse is on you, I cannot lift that curse. So either way, you are still going to die. But getting into the 5th chapter of this storyline, we actually pick up with Spider-Man right now breaking into Latveria. Now, this is huge because this country is actually protected by Doctor Doom. And matter of fact, we see Spider-Man right now breaking into the Castle of Doom, the home of Doctor Doom. Now, at this point in Marvel Comics, I want to say that Doctor Doom was not in Latveria. And so with that, it makes it easier for Spider-Man to break into the Castle of Doom. Now, we do see two characters right now with Spider-Man as they are breaking into the Castle of Doom, and those two characters are wearing old Iron Man suits as a way to protect them as they are breaking into the Castle of Doom. Now, we have no idea who these two characters are, but we are going to learn very soon. And we come to find out that it is Mary Jane and Aunt May who were wearing the Iron Man suits. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, Mary Jane, I can see wearing the Iron Man suit. But when it comes to Aunt May, I'm kind of like, you brought your Aunt May on this mission to break into Latveria, the Castle of Doom. Why in the world would you do that? But of course, that is the moment we come to find out the reason why. Because they want to use Doctor Doom's time machine. And of course, they want to use Doctor Doom's time machine as a way to relive certain moments in their past lives. And of course, they go back in time to relive the moment where you have Peter Parker's parents leaving Peter behind with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, but promising that they would come back. But of course, we know they do not come back. And this is kind of hard for Peter Parker because he now has to watch his parents leave once again, but this time knowing that he'll never see them again. It's basically reliving the worst moment of his life besides the death of Uncle Ben. Now for Aunt May, this is also hard for her because she is seeing Uncle Ben alive again. And of course, she does miss Uncle Ben so very much. But of course, while these characters are reliving this moment, that is the moment the time machine actually just shuts down on our characters. And we come to find out why the time machine was shut down, because it was shut down by the robots that are protecting Castle of Doom. And so with that, you do have these robots begin the process of actually attacking Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and also Aunt May. Now you do have Peter Parker being Spider-Man trying his best to fight against the robots. But this is the moment we actually see the beginning of Peter Parker dying. And what I mean is that in the middle of his fight against these robots, he feels some kind of pain. And the pain is so bad that you have Peter Parker stop in his track. He falls to the ground in serious pain. Now, luckily for Peter Parker, Aunt May and Mary Jane still had their Iron Man armor suits as a way to get rid of the robots, pick up Peter Parker, and leave Latveria. But now they know that whatever is killing Peter Parker is working very fast. Now, you do have Tony Stark give Peter Parker the ability to go to Las Vegas because Tony knows that Spider-Man is dying soon, and he wants to make sure that the last few days of Spider-Man life is actually a peaceful life. And so, of course, he does send him over to Vegas, which to me is kind of like, you want to make sure he has a peaceful last couple days, and you send this man to Vegas, where Vegas is known for having a lot of different problems. And of course, while you have Spider-Man out there gambling and just making money left and right, that is the moment he has the wrecking crew arrive. And of course, they do attack the casino that Peter Parker is at. And so you do have Peter Parker change into his Spider-Man outfit as a way to stop the wrecking crew. And so with Tony's idea of sending Peter Parker over to Vegas as a way to relax, honestly did not work. But then you have Tony tell Peter Parker he does have one more idea in mind. But then we pick up with Morlun, because remember, Morlun is back, and Morlun has been watching over Mary Jane, Aunt May, and Peter Parker. But then you have Morlun in this section of the book say it is time. It is time for him to feast. Meaning that this could be the moment that Peter Parker is supposed to die. And so you do have Morlun actually go inside Avengers Tower to look for Peter Parker, to eat him basically. But when he walks around Avengers Tower, that is the moment he comes to find out Peter Parker is not there. Neither is Mary Jane. Aunt May is, but not Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And so that is the moment you actually have Morlun wonder, where in the world is Spider-Man? And we come to find out what was that bright idea that Tony Stark had to make the last days for Peter Parker the best days of his life. He gave Peter Parker and Mary Jane the ability to go into a spaceship and actually stay in space to get the best view you can, which is the planet Earth. And of course, spend time alone with one another, which could be the last moment they could spend together. And that is why Morlun cannot find Peter Parker or Mary Jane, because right now they're in space, watching over the Earth. Not really watching over the Earth, but just looking at it and being amazed how great it looks. But of course, spending the last day with one another as husband and wife. And so getting into the last chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Spider-Man dying. Yes, this is the death of Spider-Man, and this is huge because In the last chapter, you have Spider-Man thinking that he is just going to have a normal day and just swing around New York, minding his business, thinking that nothing bad is going to happen at this moment. But that is the moment he actually does run into Morlun. Now remember, the last time Spider-Man had fought against Morlun, Spider-Man had a hard time even fighting against Morlun, to the point where Morlun had almost killed Spider-Man. But the only reason why Spider-Man won is because Spider-Man had to inject himself with more radiation as a way to kill Morlun, because he knew that as soon as Morlun tried to feast on him, all that radiation in his body would kill Morlun. Now remember, we have no idea how in the world Morlun is alive again. He's just back. But either way though, that was the last time Spider-Man won against Morlun. But of course, this time Morlun catches Spider-Man off guard. And like I said earlier, Spider-Man had a hard time beating Morlun last time, which means in this battle right here, Spider-Man is once again having a hard time fighting against Morlun, a character who is just so fast, so strong, that for Spider-Man, it's too hard for him to handle. On top of that, Spider-Man is dying, and so he's weaker than usual. And so this right now is just easy picking for Morlun when it comes to beating down on Spider-Man. And Spider-Man is trying everything he can to survive against Morlun. But no matter what, Morlun is just beating down on Spider-Man to the point where you have Morlun tell Spider-Man, "Don't worry, I am going to tell your family that you tried your best." And that is the moment you have Morlun take the eye of Spider-Man and then continue to beat down on Spider-Man over and over and over again until Spider-Man is dead right there in the middle of New York. And things will only get weirder in the next video that we are going to do. But this is where And so getting into the first chapter of this video, we actually pick up where the last video left off at, with Morlun killing Spider-Man, which was huge. And matter of fact, he wants to go ahead and feed on Spider-Man. Because remember, when it comes to Morlun, apparently he goes after characters that represent an animal. So like Black Panther or Spider-Man. Now with that being said, he wants to feed on them because it's a way for him to survive. And right now he wants to feed on Spider-Man. But then he realized it's not the right time to feed on Spider-Man. That right there is kind of important, because if you're Morlun, if you just killed your prey, why not go ahead and feed on them now? But either way though, you do have Morlun leave because the police arrive. And with the police arriving, they do run over to see who is on the ground dead right now. Is it actually Spider-Man? And of course, they come to find out it is Spider-Man. And when they take his mask off to see who it is, they can't even tell it is Peter Parker, because Morlun did a number on the face of Peter Parker. It's so swollen, they have no idea who this man is. Now, here comes the big shocker though. You do have an officer actually tell us that Peter Parker is not dead. He is actually alive. And that right there is huge, because now they can rush him to a nearby hospital. Now, of course, with Spider-Man being taken to a nearby hospital, word gets out very quickly. And that word gets right back over to Avengers Tower. Because you have to remember, by this point in Marvel Comics, Peter Parker was an Avenger. He was part of the new Avengers that Brian Michael Bendis was working on. But with that being said, with the Avengers knowing, of course, Mary Jane and Aunt May also find out. Because Peter Parker, Aunt May, Mary Jane, they were all living in Avengers Tower. On top of that, Peter Parker and Mary Jane at this point in Marvel Comics, they were still married. But either way though, of course, with the word getting out that Spider-Man was badly beaten and taken to a nearby hospital, you have Mary Jane, Aunt May, the Avengers, they all run towards a hospital. But at the same time, so did Morlun. Because Morlun realized after he beat down on Spider-Man, he wasn't dead. And so with that, you have Morlun getting ready to actually kill off Peter Parker while everyone else is in the waiting room waiting on word on Peter Parker. Is he dead or alive? And that is the moment we actually do see Morlun about to put his hands on Peter Parker's body to drain his life force. But that is the moment you do have Mary Jane just jump in to protect her man. Now, I understand why she did this, because it is her man. She wants to protect Peter Parker, even though he's literally on his deathbed right now. She wants to protect him. But at the same time though, girl, this is Morlun, the man who killed your husband. And the last time Peter Parker and Morlun fought back in JMS Volume 1, Peter Parker barely won against Morlun. So I understand why you're doing this, but you have to realize you do not stand a chance at all. And so with that, you have Morlun just kind of beating her down, not actually beating her down, but throwing her around over the place and actually breaking her arm. And this is where things get even crazier, because with Mary Jane being attacked by Morlun, that is the moment you have Peter Parker just wake up. He wakes up and he goes crazy. He's not saying a word. He's basically yelling and screaming and attacking Morlun. And for some reason, Morlun is unable to actually do anything at all to fight back against Peter Parker. It's just Morlun getting beat down by Spider-Man. To the point, it does look like Spider-Man is about to eat Morlun. Like how Morlun feeds on spiders and panthers and other animal characters. Right now, you have Peter Parker about to do the same thing to Morlun. And right after Peter Parker was able to actually take a bite out of Morlun, that begins the process of Morlun actually dying. I mean, literally, Morlun dies right there and it turns into dust right in the room with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. But while Morlun is dying, that is the moment we do see a lot of energy just going around the room around Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And you have Peter Parker just trying to control himself, because what he just did, that wasn't Peter Parker thinking straight. It wasn't really him kind of protecting Mary Jane. For some strange reason, he just had to attack Morlun. And the reason why I say that, because once that energy goes away, you have Peter Parker just fall to the ground. And basically, you have Mary Jane take Peter Parker into her arms and onto her lap to kind of cuddle Peter Parker. But of course, when she does that, you do have Peter Parker tell Mary Jane it's too late. Like, there's no way he can survive after everything he has gone through in the last few hours, meaning that he is going to die right there in her arms. And he does. Right when the Avengers arrive to see what was all that noise about, Peter Parker died in her arms. And when the Avengers arrive, of course, they're upset because now they lost a teammate of theirs. They lost someone who was close to them, someone they actually care a lot for. But of course, you do have Iron Man then pick up the body of Peter Parker and fly away to take the body away back over to Avengers Tower. One reason, well, a lot of reasons, but the main reason, to protect the secret identity of Peter Parker. But at the same time, Spider-Man was an Avenger, and he thinks that the Avengers should handle the death of Peter Parker. Not the hospital, but the Avengers. Now, when it comes to the second chapter of this storyline, it is really more about the support characters around Peter Parker. So like Mary Jane, Aunt May, the Avengers, like How are they grieving over the death of Peter Parker? And so with that being said, we actually pick up with Mary Jane telling Aunt May that Peter Parker is dead. And this is huge because Aunt May has lost Uncle Ben. Aunt May has lost the parents of Peter Parker. Aunt May has lost her own parents. And now the boy that she has raised as a son is now also dead. And for her, it's just so hard to believe that Peter Parker is also dead. But then a few moments later, we actually pick up with Mary Jane right now talking to Tony Stark, because with the death of Spider-Man, the world had no idea that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so, of course, with Tony Stark, he wants to give Mary Jane some options as a way to protect the secret identity of Spider-Man from all his villains. Meaning that when they bury Peter Parker, they don't want the world to know that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so, of course, you do have Tony Stark kind of give her some different options. And honestly, I'm not going to sit down and explain each of the options because, of course, it's too hard for Mary Jane to actually sit down and think about how they're going to do his service, how in the world they're going to bury his body, how in the world they're going to deal with the idea of not telling the world that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so, of course, she does run into the bathroom to throw up. Now, that is the moment you actually have Wolverine hit on Mary Jane once she comes out of the bathroom. I don't mean physically hit, I mean he actually flirts with her. He actually asks her out. Now, of course, you're the reader, you're kind of like, what in the world? Why would Wolverine do that? He knows that Peter Parker just died. Why in the world would he hit on the wife of the man who just died? But the reason why he did that, because he wants Mary Jane to basically use her anger towards him as a way to work through the process of grieving over the death of Peter Parker. Now, to me, that's still a bad reason why to flirt with the wife of the man who just died. I understand you want to help her get through the grieving process, but that is just still wrong, my dude. But either way, that's what Wolverine does to Mary Jane. But after that, you do have Mary Jane go back over to Tony Stark to tell Tony what she wants to do for the body of Peter Parker for his service. And that is the moment she does tell Tony Stark that she wants to have a funeral service with all of his friends and family. But on top of that, she wants everyone to know that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. She does not want that secret to die with him. She wants the world to know that this man was a hero. And with that being said, she does walk away from Tony Stark to go comfort Aunt May. Because right now, Aunt May needs her and she needs Aunt May as a way to work through this process, the death of Peter Parker. But then we get this moment where we actually do see Mary Jane meeting up with Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, because you have to remember, Spider-Woman was also an Avenger at this point in Marvel Comics, a teammate of Spider-Man. Now, this is Jessica Drew kind of sharing her feelings about Peter Parker, like how she feels about the death of Peter Parker. Now, with that being said, though, Jessica Drew, let me explain one thing real quick. When she first appeared as Spider-Woman, she had no connections at all to Spider-Man. Like, basically, she was her own character, and that was it. And for years and years and years, they never had a connection. It wasn't really until the year 2000 when Marvel tried their best to build a connection between the two characters, because they're both Spider people. And matter of fact, she even says that when Peter Parker died, she could actually feel his death. And the reason why, because they're both Spider people. And that is why she knew that something was wrong with Peter Parker. It's Marvel kind of saying, hey, we're trying our best to build a bridge between the two characters. And that is the moment you do have Tony Stark set off the alarms to tell everyone there is trouble inside the Avengers Tower, which is huge. But everyone knew where to go, which was the room that was holding the dead body of Peter Parker. And the reason why everyone is freaking out, because when they get inside that room, they see that the window was busted open. Of course, it was busted open from the inside, but that's not the weird part. The weird part is when they look over to the dead body of Peter Parker, it's no longer just a dead body. It is now a husk, because apparently something had bust out of Peter Parker's dead body, leaving his old dead body as a husk. And now the big question is, what popped out of Peter Parker's body? Was it Peter Parker or something else? And where did that thing go? Because apparently they broke out the window and went somewhere else. And Tony Stark was able to tell that the window was broken from the inside, meaning that no one broke inside to steal the body of Peter Parker. And so now all our side characters, they have so many questions they need answers to. Now, that is the moment we actually do jump over to a bunch of kids. Now, these kids are actually not important at all for this storyline. Matter of fact, they're just here to tell us something else is going on. And what I mean is that when one of the kids look under the bridge that they were just passing by, he sees something. And what he saw was some kind of cocoon to let us know that, of course, something is growing inside that cocoon. And of course, we know it has to be Peter Parker or possibly something that has connection to Peter Parker. And so getting into the third chapter of this storyline, we actually pick up with the Avengers right now trying to figure out what popped out of the body of Peter Parker, but at the same time, trying to figure out where did that thing actually go to? Because it has to be somewhere in the city. On top of that, they kind of have faith that there could be a possibility it's Peter Parker, that he is alive again. But either way, right now, they're trying to figure out where in the world should they look to figure out what popped out of Peter Parker. But that is the moment we actually jump into the mind of Peter Parker to see that right now he's having some kind of weird dream. And with that weird dream, we do see him right now being confronted by a spider, a huge spider. But of course, while that spider is staring at Peter Parker, you have the spider showing Peter Parker the origin of his life. When he got bit by the spider, the thug that he could have stopped, but of course that thug ended up killing Uncle Ben. It's showing all the big moments of Peter Parker's life, and he's wondering what in the world is going on. What kind of dream is this? But once he goes through all those different moments, and when he throws up, that is the moment he hears something talking to him, and it's coming from the trees, and he's wondering, what in the world is going on? And so that is the moment you have Peter Parker be confronted by a monster-looking creature that's wearing a Spider-Man outfit. Now, this is the moment you actually have Spider-Man the Other build off what JMS was trying to give us back in Volume 1 of his run. Because remember, in Volume 1 of JMS Spider-Man, basically, you have Peter Parker found out that there were other people across the world who had powers like him. Of course, he only met one other person, and that person was Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel told Peter Parker that when it comes to Peter Parker being Spider-Man, he basically represents the Spider God, because there's different kind of animal gods out there across the world, and they have different characters who represent those animal gods. Now, you didn't have Ezekiel ask Peter Parker one question. When it came to the spider that had bit Peter Parker, what came first, the spider bite or the radiation? Because for Peter Parker, his whole life, he was left to believe that it was the radiation that made the spider give Peter Parker powers. But then you have Ezekiel say, no, that spider was from the spider god. Radiation was just something added onto the spider. And so with that, it kind of flipped the origin of Peter Parker on its head. Now, with all that being said right now, you do have this creature kind of build off that right there to remind Peter Parker that you represent the spider god, that your powers come from the spider god. But then you have the spider say, listen, when you died, the human side died, but not the spider side, meaning that there were two kind of things inside of you, a human and a spider. But the human side was the side that died, not the spider, because the spider side refused to die. And that is how you're alive right now, because your spider side was able to keep you alive, to give you a new body out of your old body. But Peter Parker, if you want to live and continue on, you have to embrace it. You have to face it. And that is the moment you do have Peter Parker break out of that cocoon we saw earlier at the end of the last chapter, the one that little boy found earlier. And so that tells us that Peter Parker is alive and well. I mean, technically, his dream told us that he was alive and well. But seeing him come out of that cocoon, it definitely says Peter Parker is alive again, all alive and well. And so with that, now he must go back over to Avengers Tower to show everyone that he is alive. And so you do have Peter Parker actually go back to Avengers Tower. And when he does show everyone that he is alive and well. And of course, for Mary Jane and Aunt May, they are so excited because their nephew, their husband, is alive and well. He's back. And the Avengers, they're like, yeah, he's back. And so, of course, they do have a big dinner. But now the Avengers, Peter Parker, Aunt May, even Mary Jane, they all have questions. What happened to you, though, Peter? Because you were dead. Like, you were literally dead on that bed. But then you turned your old body to a husk, made a new body, and here you are alive and well. What happened? There are so many questions, but for right now, they're going to let Peter rest to spend some time with Mary Jane and Aunt May. But then in the middle of the night, you do have Peter Parker get out of bed and he walks over to his dead body, or the husk of his dead body, to get one thing, the wedding ring, to prove that he is married to Mary Jane. But either way, while he's getting that ring, you do have Peter Parker thinking about something. Because remember, the monster said there was two sides to Peter Parker, the human and the spider. And so now the question is, who is Peter Parker right now? The human or the spider? And with that, you have Peter Parker just get the ring and walk back to bed. And so getting into the 4th chapter of this book, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now being put through some tests because Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Hank Pym, they want to know what in the world is going on with Peter Parker because what he just went through is not normal. And they're trying to figure out how does his body work? Because his body apparently works different. And of course, they want to know how does it work? Now, this is going to lead into a couple more things happening in this storyline as a way for Marvel to wrap up the other storyline. Because we kind of find out that you do have a group of scientists that work for Tony Stark looking over the husk of the dead body of Peter Parker to figure out what happened with that body. What in the world was going on with that body? But with that being said, while those scientists right now are trying to figure out what's going on with the husk of Peter Parker, a bunch of smaller spiders apparently came out of the body of the dead body of Peter Parker, and right now they're about to come off the roof and land on the scientists. Yes, you heard that right. A bunch of spiders apparently came out of the dead body of Peter Parker, and they're about to literally crawl all over the scientists who are right now studying the husk of Peter Parker. Now, this is also the moment you have the book remind us that Peter Parker is actually a teacher. And that right there is very huge because that was done in the early days of JMS Spider-Man run. But of course, Marvel loved the idea of Peter Parker being a teacher. Now, with that being said, somebody else is now being hired at the same school that Peter Parker works at. And that person is no other than Flash Thompson. Yes, this was the moment Flash Thompson came back into Spider-Man comics, and he is going to be the coach at the same school that Peter Parker is teaching at. It's a way to build up future storylines down the road. Now, we do get this moment where you actually have Mary Jane thanking Wolverine for what he did earlier, because apparently what he did earlier was okay, it was all right, but to me, in reality, it was still kind of weird. But either way, you do have Mary Jane thanking Wolverine for kind of being there for her, to help her get through the death of Peter Parker, even though he's now alive again, and even though what Wolverine did was really messed up. But getting back over to Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Hank Pym, and Peter Parker, you do have our characters continue the idea of trying to figure out what happened to Peter Parker, because what happened to him was not normal. It was really weird. But either way though, while you have our characters trying to figure that out, that is the moment you have Tony Stark put his hand on the shoulder of Peter Parker. And with him doing that, of course, it makes Peter Parker just freak out. I don't mean literally, but he does turn around and trips Tony Stark and putting him on the ground. Now you have everyone wonder what in the world just happened. Why did Peter Parker do that? And you have Peter say that for some strange reason, when Tony put his hand on the shoulder of Peter Parker, it activated the spider sense that Peter Parker has. And apparently it just freaked out Peter Parker. He had no choice but to just defend himself, even though Tony Stark was not actually attacking him. And so now it's kind of like, is his spider sense more active now? Has that also evolved as well? But that is the moment you do have Aunt May appear, and it's hilarious because you have Aunt May tell Reed, Tony, and Hank to let her nephew go so that he can actually have some fun. Go outside, go around town, be yourself. And of course, all three men are kind of like, listen, we cannot tell Aunt May no, because that's the one person I do not want to see angry. So let Peter Parker go because Aunt May say so. But that is the moment we actually pick up with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Now, Peter Parker is actually Spider-Man right now. And right now we see him swinging around town while holding on to Mary Jane. Something we have seen so many times in Marvel Comics. And matter of fact, Mary Jane is actually wearing a disguise just in case anybody looks up and see her with Spider-Man. Because a lot of folks know that Mary Jane is married. And the reason why they know that because Mary Jane is a TV star on a bunch of different soap operas. But either way though, while they're kind of just having fun going around town, that is the moment you have Peter Parker's spider sense just go crazy. It's so crazy that he basically has to stop and catch himself. And he almost fell to his death with Mary Jane. And of course, you have MJ like, are you dying again? And he says no. He says something set off his spider sense. And that is the moment he look over at Avengers Tower and sees that Avengers Tower is covered in spider webs. And that right there is very confusing. When he gets inside to see what in the world is going on, he knew to go over to where his dead body was being held at in that room. And when he gets inside that room, he is confronted by some kind of spider creature. All those little spiders we saw earlier, they basically formed a body together. And right now, you have Peter Parker just freaking out because he has no idea why these spiders are actually here. But things get even crazier because that is the moment you do have some stingers actually pop out of the wrist of Peter Parker. And he's kind of like, wait a second, when in the world did I get stingers? Why do I have stingers? What in the world is going on? Now, while he tries to fight against this creature, the creature is able to dodge all the moves of Peter Parker to the point you actually have the creature just get away and leave Avengers Tower. But Spider-Man knows he has to chase after that creature to learn what in the world is going on with him and that creature. So getting into the 5th chapter of this book, we actually do pick up with Spider-Man chasing down that random spider creature. Now, of course, we do come to find out that Spider-Man is going to call it a female because the figure the spiders took is a female creature. Now, with that being said, though, you do have Spider-Man begin the process of trying to catch this creature. But of course, he is unable to actually catch the creature. Now, you do have Spider-Man asking the creature questions, but at first, the creature was unable to actually speak. But then you have the creature begin the process of actually talking back to Peter Parker to kind of help Peter understand what in the world is going on right now. Now, this is the moment we can actually say that Marvel is trying to, not really trying, they did build off what JMS gave us in his first Spider-Man story, the one that Morlun appeared. But at the same time, you could technically say that Marvel was building up the Spider-Verse even though they had no idea that they were going to do Spider-Verse. And the reason why I say that, because you do have this spider creature explain to Spider-Man that when it comes to fate, Spider-Man was supposed to die. He was supposed to die and Morlun was supposed to feed on him. But of course, there is this powerful being called the Reaver that apparently decided that Peter Parker should not be dead, that Peter Parker should have a second chance in life because it wasn't time for Peter Parker to die. Now, of course, with that happening, it did upset other gods in the universe with the idea of Peter Parker having a second life. Now, of course, Marvel is not going to really explain more about the Reaver until Spider-Verse. But again, this was Marvel just saying, hey, we have an idea, we're going to start small, but sooner or later that idea is going to explode. And when it does, bam, Spider-Verse. Now, with that being said, though, you actually do have the creature tell Spider-Man that it is Peter Parker's spider side. Because remember what that monster said earlier. When it comes to Peter Parker, he has two sides. He has the human side and the spider side. And the big question was, which side fought the idea of dying? Which side wanted to come to life once again? And of course, it was the human side. And so you do have the spider creature say, I am your spider side. We were supposed to be dead. But of course, you did not want to die, and nor did the Reaver. It wanted you alive again. And that is the moment you actually have the spider creature just leave. It just leaves, and we end on that note right there with all that jumbo right there. Now, of course, you do have Peter Parker actually go back over to Avengers Tower to make sure that everyone is okay and well. And of course, you do have the Avengers kind of upset with what happened to their tower being covered in a bunch of spider webs. But either way, you do have Tony Stark then tell Peter Parker, like, their best option right now is to continue to run more tests on Spider-Man to figure out what in the world is going on. On top of that, Reed Richards actually took samples of those spider webs that had covered the Avengers Tower to hopefully learn more about that, but also Peter Parker as well. But of course, it's them saying we have to keep testing you because we have no idea what's happening to you. But that is the moment we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now having a conversation with Mary Jane. Now, this conversation is actually very important. And the reason why, because it's Peter Parker telling Mary Jane what death is like. Because he tells her he remembers being beaten down by Morlun over and over and over again. But on top of that, he says he remembers everything going black and then seeing a bunch of lights. And he knew when he saw those lights, he knew he was dead. But then he was brought back to life. And now with that spider creature telling Peter Parker that apparently you were supposed to be dead. You were supposed to feed Morlun. But some kind of God felt like it was not your time and brought you back to life. it's so hard for Peter Parker to wrap his mind around that, because that is not something so easy to understand. That right there is so hard to go through, that in reality, you should be dead in the ground, but you're not, because some God has a plan for you. And what that plan is, who knows? And so Peter Parker is having a hard time going through that kind of process. Now, we do see Peter Parker actually go over to Doctor Strange's house. Now, the reason why, because remember, in our last video, when Peter Parker found out that he was dying, he was trying to find a cure. And with that, he went to the smartest minds across the earth. Reed Richards, Bruce Banner, Hank Pym, T'Challa, all those characters, to see if they're able to actually find a way to save his life. But they all kept saying no left and right. And so with that, he went over to Doctor Strange to see if magic could help him. And you had Strange tell Peter Parker that there was some kind of curse on him, and that curse was going to kill Peter Parker. And so picking up right now, it's Peter Parker coming back over to Doctor Strange to ask him more questions about the idea of some kind of magical being or cosmic being actually being able to control the life of Peter Parker, to decide if he should be dead or alive. And that is the moment you have Doctor Strange tell Peter Parker that when it comes to Peter, yes, he's involved in some kind of cosmic being. And right now, he is at the center of a lot of different things. But of course, Doctor Strange can't tell Peter Parker what those things are. And so for now, it's just Marvel saying, hey, sooner or later, we are going to explain all of this. But for right now, we're not going to. But then we pick up with Peter Parker outside on the balcony thinking to himself. Now, real quick, by the way, Peter Parker is wearing a New York Giants jacket. And with that being said, I like it because I am a huge Giants fan. And so with that being said, I'm kind of like, hey, I'm hoping you're a fan, but you're not just wearing that jacket because you're in New York. But either way, though, you do have Peter Parker right now kind of thinking to himself about the idea that he was supposed to die, that he should be no longer on this earth. But of course, some God said, no, Peter Parker, you deserve a second life. Get back out there and do your thing. Now, that God does have its own plans, but of course, Peter Parker does not know those plans. Now, with that being said, though, you actually do have Aunt May walk out. And you have Aunt May doing the Aunt May thing, being that mother for Peter Parker by telling him, hey, listen, I know what you're going through. Like, I don't understand it, but I know what you're going through, and it's not normal. With the idea of you should be dead, not here on this earth, that you should be long gone. But of course, you were given a second chance. And right now, maybe, just maybe, the reason why you got that second chance because your story is not done yet. But on top of that, you have more things to prove to the world and to me as well, as a hero, as a nephew, as a husband. And so with that being said, you should cherish the moment with the idea that you were given a second life. Because really, most people don't get that life. Think about your Uncle Ben. He was not given a second chance. He is still gone. So you should cherish this moment and keep pushing forward and be the hero that you are. Now, we do get into the last chapter of this storyline. And really, the last chapter of this storyline is really more of the idea of, is Peter Parker actually Peter Parker? And what I mean is that you do have Tony Stark continue to run more tests on Peter Parker. But while those tests are being run, you do have Tony Stark say, it is amazing that you have the memories of the other Peter. And you have Peter Parker realize that Tony Stark said that. And he's wondering, why did Tony say that? And you have Tony say, listen, you have to understand what's going on. You were dead, and then a brand new version of you pops out of your old body, and now we're supposed to believe that you are the same Peter Parker? How do we know you're not some kind of clone or some kind of recreation of the Peter Parker that we all know and love. Like, you have to understand how this could be to us. Yes, you're saying you're Peter Parker, but are you really the original Peter Parker? But then we see Peter Parker actually go over to a character known as Leo. Now, Leo is a character who apparently fixes up superhero suits, meaning that if a superhero ever gets their suit torn or whatever, he's the guy you go to get your suit fixed back up. And so, of course, you do have Spider-Man coming over to Leo to kind of fix some areas that got a little beat up thanks to Peter Parker being Spider-Man. But while he's waiting for Leo to fix his suit, that is the moment you have Spider-Man hear that something is going on in the city, which of course means he has to leave and go handle that problem. Now, this is the moment you actually have Marvel kind of explain that when it comes to the powers of Peter Parker, his powers had actually evolved. And that is a good thing, but bad thing at the same time. And the reason why I say that, because when it comes to Peter Parker, he does have the ability now to sense things around his webbing. Because when he arrives at the scene, he does see this building falling apart. And with this building falling apart, Peter Parker has to go inside and save the lives of the people who are trapped inside that building. Now, with that being said, though, as the people are grabbing his web or walking around his web, he's able to sense things that kind of vibrate near his web or actually touch his webs. And so with that being said, it actually helps him find a young girl who is still trapped inside the building that is falling apart. By making a huge web that is connected to the different areas of the building, he was able to find her and get her out of there, thanks to the vibrations of the webbings. And so with that, he pulls her out and the day is saved. But that is the moment he realized that he has evolved, that he has gotten better, but he has evolved into a spider even more. And really, the book kind of ends on that note right there, because you do have Peter Parker actually go back home to Mary Jane. And when he does, you have Mary Jane kind of do what Aunt May did earlier. And what I mean is that you had Aunt May kind of talk to Peter Parker about the idea of he should enjoy the idea that he has a second chance in life, because most people don't get that second chance. But now he has it, and he must use it for the correct reasons, to help the world, to continue to show the world what a hero is like. And you have Mary Jane kind of say, listen, all of your past mistakes, all of your past failures, they're all gone. Because this is the new Peter Parker, a new beginning, a new fresh start. And you have Peter Parker kind of take that and say, my aunt and Mary Jane are right. This is a new beginning in my life. And so, of course, he does kiss Mary Jane. But then the next page, we actually see Tony Stark working on something new for Spider-Man. And of course, that new is the Iron Spider suit that we see in Civil War. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know. Your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. Later, guys.